The morning sun poured over the sprawling military base, reflecting off rows of steel barracks and the neatly trimmed parade grounds. Soldiers in crisp uniforms marched in perfect formation, their boots striking the concrete with rhythmic precision. Amid the chorus of discipline, one figure moved differently. Ava Mercer stepped out of the transport vehicle, her presence calm, deliberate, and oddly unsettling. Her hair, long and golden, brushed against her shoulders, swaying in defiance of regulations she had yet to formally acknowledge. Every eye turned toward her as she walked, but she seemed oblivious to the whispers, the glances, and the subtle judgments. She had chosen to arrive like any other recruit, blending in as much as possible, yet she carried an aura of quiet authority. Ava's eyes, sharp and calculating, scanned the base with meticulous attention. She noted the placement of guards, the schedules of officers, the way the younger recruits shuffled uneasily when an NCO barked orders. Every detail mattered. Every movement hinted at a larger pattern, one she intended to map fully before anyone realized her true purpose. At the front of the formation stood General Ross Halstead, a man whose reputation stretched far beyond the base. Gruff, imposing, and legendary for his unyielding discipline, he rarely tolerated excuses or anyone who seemed weaker than the standard he demanded. His gaze swept across the new arrivals, stopping abruptly at Ava. He had seen many recruits arrive over the years, but there was something different about her. Not fragile, not timid, yet not overtly aggressive. Something in her posture suggested confidence born not of arrogance, but of purpose. Halstead frowned. He did not like uncertainty, and this recruit radiated it. His brow furrowed as he made a mental note to keep an eye on her. She would either adapt or fail, and he would be there to witness every moment of it. The recruits were called to attention, standing stiffly in their new uniforms, and Ava followed suit. She moved seamlessly into formation, though she remained slightly apart, a subtle distancing that did not go unnoticed. Whispers flitted through the ranks. Who is she? Why is she so calm? She doesn't even flinch. Ava ignored them, keeping her focus forward, her mind already analyzing patterns, routines, and hierarchies. The base commander's assistant, a young lieutenant with a clipboard, approached Halstead with a cautious expression. "Sir, we have a few anomalies in the arrival documentation." Halstead waved him off, not yet willing to be distracted. He had learned to rely on instinct over paper, and instinct told him Ava was more than she seemed. After the formalities, the recruits were escorted to their quarters and assigned bunks. Ava's room was small, sparse, and functional. She unpacked her minimal belongings with precise movements, each item placed deliberately, each fold exact. A bed neatly made, uniforms folded to perfection, and a single journal tucked into a drawer, all simple, all practical, yet all suggesting an underlying methodical mind. Later, as the recruits were led to the training yard, the first whispers about Ava began to circulate. "She's too calm, like she's not even nervous," one whispered. "I heard she's some kind of civilian genius," another muttered skeptically. The rumors were as inaccurate as they were persistent, but Ava did not engage, did not correct, did not even acknowledge. She was watching, observing, cataloging. Halstead stood at the edge of the yard, observing the new arrivals. He could see the subtle tensions in the group, some fidgeting, some stiffening, some trying to appear confident. And then there was Ava, shoulders square, eyes forward, chin slightly lifted. She didn't march with the exaggerated movements of an eager recruit, but she didn't lag behind either. She moved with quiet assurance, a soldier comfortable in her own skin, yet aware of the battlefield of hierarchy and perception. Ava's presence did not go unnoticed by the other officers. Lieutenant Daniels, a sharp-eyed observer, leaned toward Halstead. "Sir, there's something unusual about her. I've seen a lot of recruits, but I can't place it." Halstead's eyes narrowed. "Unusual doesn't impress me. Watch her. She'll either fold or falter. That's all we need to know." Yet even as he spoke, Halstead felt an unfamiliar unease. Ava's eyes had briefly met his, not in challenge but in quiet assessment, like a chess master noting every piece on the board. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it left an impression that lingered, gnawing at the edges of his confidence. Throughout the first day of orientation, Ava moved through drills and exercises with an almost inhuman composure. When her peers stumbled under the weight of physical exertion or the pressure of military jargon, she maintained focus. Her movements were efficient, economical, and precise. Every step, every gesture conveyed competence, yet she did not boast, did not seek recognition. She existed, seemingly ordinary, but the officers could sense that she was absorbing everything, memorizing everything, calculating everything. During a brief break in training, Ava found a quiet corner of the yard. She sat cross-legged, observing the others. She watched Halstead as he barked orders, watched the soldiers respond, watched the subtle interactions that revealed alliances, rivalries, and weaknesses. Her mind was cataloging it all, every glance, every hesitation, every tiny betrayal of emotion. Even as the day ended and the recruits returned to their barracks, Ava's presence left an impression. Whispers spread through the ranks. She's not like the rest. Something about her is different. Halstead, meanwhile, retired to his office, his pride pricked by the subtle, unshakable calm she exhibited. He had dismissed her at first glance, assuming weakness, assuming inexperience. But now a quiet, unsettling realization began to form. She might be something else entirely. That evening, Ava opened her journal for the first time. She did not write down her thoughts about the day, nor her impressions of the recruits. Instead, she began sketching maps of the base, noting guard rotations, observation points, and possible vulnerabilities. It was methodical, clinical, strategic. She wrote a single line at the bottom of the page: "Observation precedes action." Then she closed it, resting for the night, her mind already planning the next day, a day that would test her, and the general, in ways neither of them could yet imagine. Ava Mercer had arrived at the base as just another recruit. Yet by the end of the first day, it was clear she was no ordinary soldier. Quiet, calm, deliberate, she had already begun reshaping perceptions, and unbeknownst to Halstead, she was only getting started. The next morning dawned crisp and bright, the sunlight glinting off the polished parade ground. Recruits assembled for inspection, their movements rigid, disciplined, each step echoing against the concrete. Ava Mercer joined the formation, her posture flawless, yet her long golden hair, still untouched by regulations, caught the eyes of every officer present. Whispers rippled through the rows of soldiers, their curiosity mingling with quiet disapproval. General Ross Halstead, standing on the elevated platform, observed the line with a critical eye. He had spent decades enforcing discipline, ensuring that every recruit followed regulations without question. Yet something about Ava unsettled him. She had refused to conform, and rather than shrinking under his authority, she had maintained perfect composure. Her hair fell in a golden cascade down her back, brushing the edge of her uniform with defiance. Halstead's patience, already fraying after years of training resistant recruits, snapped. He stomped down from the platform, his polished boots striking the concrete with authority. "Mercer," he barked, his voice cutting through the morning air. Ava's head turned, eyes forward, calm, unwavering. "Sir," she said quietly, her tone neutral, carrying no challenge, no hesitation. "You know the regulations," Halstead continued, his anger simmering beneath the surface. "Hair must be tied, cut, or otherwise compliant. You've chosen to ignore this. Why?" Ava's calm gaze met his. "Sir, I am fully capable of performing all required duties as trained. Hair length does not impede performance." A murmur ran through the formation. Other recruits exchanged nervous glances, unsure whether to be impressed or alarmed. Halstead's face darkened. In his experience, insubordination, even subtle, was contagious. Allowing this to go unchecked could unravel the discipline of the entire company. "You will comply immediately," Halstead barked, the authority in his voice leaving no room for debate. "I am complying with all performance standards, sir," Ava replied evenly, a flicker of defiance masked behind her calm demeanor. For a tense moment, the air hung heavy. Soldiers shifted nervously, uncertain what the general would do. Halstead's fingers tightened around the clipboard he had been holding. He felt a mix of irritation and incredulity. Who was this woman who dared to remain unflinching in the face of his command? Then, almost instinctively, Halstead made a decision that would mark the day forever. He gestured sharply to the nearest trainee standing by the formation. "Bring the scissors." A hush fell over the yard. Soldiers froze mid-step, eyes darting between Ava and the approaching implement. Ava did not flinch, did not step back. Her calm, unshakable demeanor made Halstead's own unease grow, though he would never admit it aloud. The trainee handed Halstead the scissors, trembling slightly under the intensity of the general's gaze. Halstead gripped them tightly, walking toward Ava with deliberate steps. Every recruit watched, some with anticipation, some with fear. Halstead stopped in front of her, the air thick with tension. Without warning, he brought the scissors up and chopped off a long lock of her hair, the sound sharp and final in the quiet morning. The strands fell to the ground, a golden pile of defiance cut down by authority. The recruits gasped. Some whispered, unsure if they had just witnessed humiliation or a symbolic act of discipline. Ava stood perfectly still. Her hands remained at her sides. Her expression did not change. She did not flinch, did not show anger, nor embarrassment, nor fear. Her eyes, steady and unwavering, met Halstead, and in that single, silent look, a ripple of something unspoken passed between them. The yard remained silent for several heartbeats. Halstead, who had seen thousands of recruits break under pressure, felt a chill run down his spine. Nothing he had done, nothing he had enforced in decades of military leadership, had produced a reaction like this. Ava's calmness was unnerving. For the first time, he felt something unfamiliar, doubt. Whispers among the recruits grew louder. "Who is she?" one muttered. "She doesn't even care." Another shook his head in disbelief. "I've never seen anyone stand like that while the general, he's furious." Halstead's own officers exchanged glances. Lieutenant Daniels, who had noticed Ava the day before, watched with a mix of fascination and apprehension. "Sir, she's different," Daniels muttered under his breath. "There's something about her." Halstead's jaw tightened. "Different doesn't impress me," he muttered back. Yet a small, nagging thought gnawed at the edges of his mind. Her stillness, her composure, her quiet defiance, it was not weakness. It was something else, something he could not yet name. Ava finally spoke, her voice calm, controlled. "Sir, the hair does not affect my performance or readiness. I understand regulations and I will comply in future drills, but it will not hinder my effectiveness in duty." Halstead paused. Her words were polite, respectful, yet carried an underlying certainty that unsettled him further. He had expected fear, embarrassment, hesitation, anything to affirm his authority. Instead, he faced a wall of quiet confidence that he could not penetrate. "Very well," he said at last, though his voice lacked the finality he intended. He handed the scissors back to the trembling trainee, who scurried away. Halstead stepped back, eyes narrowing. He did not yet understand who this recruit was, but he knew something fundamental had shifted. Throughout the day, Ava performed flawlessly. Physical drills, tactical exercises, and academic evaluations all proceeded under her silent command of herself. She moved through the yard like a shadow, with purpose, precise, efficient, and methodical. Every movement carried intent, every glance assessed the environment. Even fellow recruits who had doubted her skill could not help but be impressed. Halstead watched from the sidelines, a mixture of irritation and reluctant admiration stirring within him. He had prided himself on knowing the strengths and weaknesses of everyone under his command. Yet Ava defied all his expectations. She was not just compliant, she was competent, focused, and in ways he could not articulate, untouchable. By evening, rumors about her abilities and composure had spread across the base. Soldiers whispered about her calm demeanor, her precision, and the way she seemed to see everything at once. Some joked nervously that she could probably run the base better than Halstead himself. Others wondered aloud who she had been before arriving here. In her barracks, Ava quietly collected her thoughts. She made no mention of the hair incident in her journal. Instead, she meticulously recorded observations, guard rotations, officer routines, training patterns, and areas where security might be weak. The scissors incident was noted only as a minor distraction, a test, perhaps, of her composure. She had passed it without effort. Halstead retired to his office later that evening, replaying the morning's events in his mind. He had cut her hair expecting compliance, fear, or at least discomfort. Instead, he had faced calm resolve, a quiet assertion of power he had not anticipated. For the first time in decades, he felt a flicker of uncertainty. Who was this woman, really? And what had she come here to accomplish? Unknown to Halstead, his question would soon be answered in ways he could not imagine. Ava Mercer was no ordinary recruit. Her arrival, her calmness, and her silent defiance were the opening moves in a mission far larger than the confines of this base. And Halstead, for all his authority and experience, was about to discover that appearances could be deceiving, and underestimating her would be a mistake he would never forget. The day after the hair incident, the base buzzed with activity. Recruits had begun to whisper about Ava Mercer in hushed tones. Some spoke in awe, others in disbelief. Yet Ava remained an enigma, moving through drills and academic lessons with measured precision. Every motion she made seemed deliberate, every glance purposeful, yet she interacted minimally, never drawing attention to herself unless absolutely necessary. While most officers focused on standard training routines, Lieutenant Daniels noticed something unusual. During routine documentation checks, he had run Ava's records through the base's administrative system, a standard protocol, and discovered an anomaly. Certain files, certain fingerprint records, triggered an alert that required top-secret clearance. Confused, Daniels brought it immediately to General Halstead's attention. Halstead leaned over the terminal, scanning the flagged information. At first glance, he assumed a clerical error, a common occurrence in bureaucracies. Yet something about the alert gnawed at him. The system was not merely flagging missing information. It was triggering a level of security access that Halstead had never seen applied to a recruit. "Sir, this isn't normal," Daniels said quietly. "Her fingerprints match a protected federal record. Access is restricted to high-level intelligence operatives. We may be looking at someone classified under a special assignment." Halstead's brow furrowed, a knot forming in his stomach. He had faced anomalies before: recruits who faked credentials, spies from other countries, even military personnel hiding criminal pasts, but he had never encountered anything like this. "Check again," he said, "and quietly. I don't want a panic spreading across the base." Minutes later, a team from military intelligence arrived at the base, moving swiftly and without announcement. They requested Ava Mercer by name. When she was brought forward, they paused, exchanging rapid whispers before one senior officer stepped forward. "Commander Evelyn Drake," the officer stated firmly, "you are under assignment from the Department of Defense. Your presence here is authorized by top-level clearance. All other identifications are superseded." Halstead's jaw dropped. He had been addressing a recruit, a young woman he assumed was inexperienced and fragile. Now, standing before him, was a name he had only encountered in intelligence briefings: Evelyn Drake, a legendary operative in a covert U.S. unit known informally as Lion's Shadow. Her missions were classified at the highest levels, her existence known only to a select few. The recruits around the yard had been cleared to leave for the moment, but whispers of Ava's revealed identity began to spread like wildfire. Soldiers who had once doubted her skill now looked at her with awe, and Halstead felt the crushing weight of his error. He had treated her as ordinary. He had humiliated her in front of the company, and he had been completely unaware of who she really was. Ava remained calm, her expression serene, as if she had expected this moment. She did not gloat, nor did she show frustration at the morning's events. Instead, she simply stepped forward, allowing herself to be briefed on the objectives assigned to her by Intelligence Command. Her mission was clear: investigate internal security breaches that threatened the base's integrity and assess the potential for compromised personnel. Halstead's irritation mixed with disbelief. He had spent decades ensuring the order of this base, yet he was now being told, subtly but unmistakably, that a recruit under his command outranked him in operational authority. A surge of pride and stubbornness rose within him, but it was tempered by the undeniable truth of her competence and credentials. "You'll be working directly with me on this mission," Ava said to the gathered officers, her tone calm but firm. "All operations regarding internal security must now follow my directives. I understand the sensitivities involved, and I intend to proceed with minimal disruption." Halstead's voice, tight with disbelief, cut through the room. "Excuse me, Commander, I'm in charge here. This is my base, my responsibility." Ava's gaze met his, unwavering. "General, I respect your command of this base. That said, this investigation is under my jurisdiction. Your cooperation is appreciated, but this is not negotiable." The room went silent. Halstead felt the sting of being undermined, and yet he could not deny the logic of her authority. Ava Mercer, or rather, Commander Evelyn Drake, had a level of clearance and operational expertise that made resistance futile. For the first time, Halstead realized that leadership was not about pride or ego, it was about effectiveness. As Ava began reviewing internal systems with intelligence personnel, she uncovered subtle inconsistencies. File access logs, unusual communication patterns, and unaccounted-for equipment movements pointed toward a potential breach. What had appeared to be routine operations under Halstead's command now revealed gaps he had never noticed. Every step Ava took was deliberate, revealing a level of precision and methodical thinking that left officers scrambling to keep pace. Halstead followed at a distance, observing the way she moved through digital records and questioned personnel. It was almost hypnotic, the confidence in her voice, the clarity of her instructions, the precision with which she identified anomalies. He had trained hundreds of recruits, commanded countless exercises, and yet here was someone who made him feel like a student. By evening, the gravity of Ava's mission became evident. Multiple security gaps were traced to personnel who had been overlooked in prior evaluations. Some were minor procedural lapses, but others were potentially catastrophic if exploited by external actors. Halstead's pride battled against the reality he faced. The person he had mocked, humiliated, and underestimated that morning was now the key to the base's safety. Even more unsettling was her composure. She had not raised her voice once. She had not exhibited frustration or anger. She moved through challenges as if she were 2 steps ahead at all times, thinking several moves ahead in a game no one else even realized was being played. Halstead could not help but feel a strange mix of awe and trepidation. That night, Ava returned to her quarters, as methodical as always. She reviewed the day's findings, cross-referenced them against security protocols, and began drafting a plan to trace the potential breach further. Halstead, meanwhile, sat alone in his office, staring at the strands of hair he had cut the day before. The sight of them reminded him of his error, the assumptions he had made, and the realization that appearances were not always reality. For the first time in decades, Halstead was forced to confront a simple truth. He had underestimated a recruit, and in doing so he had put himself, his soldiers, and the base at risk. Ava Evelyn Drake had walked in quietly, appeared ordinary, and yet carried authority, skill, and intelligence far beyond anything he had seen. As the moon rose over the base, casting silver light on the parade grounds, Ava prepared for the next phase of her mission. She knew the breach would not reveal itself easily. She knew that resistance, pride, and human error could complicate even the simplest investigation. But she was ready. She had been ready long before she arrived, and Halstead, for all his experience, was about to learn just how dangerous and brilliant this recruit really was. The base was no longer simply a training ground. It had become a theater of intelligence, deception, and power, and at its center stood Ava Mercer, known to the world as Commander Evelyn Drake, calm, composed, and unstoppable. The following morning, the base seemed charged with an undercurrent of tension. Recruits and officers alike moved with measured caution, the memory of Ava Mercer's revelation still fresh. Whispers of her true identity as Commander Evelyn Drake had circulated quickly, carried on hushed voices from barracks to the training yard. Even the most disciplined soldiers could not hide their curiosity and awe. Halstead, however, felt a different emotion, a simmering mixture of anger, disbelief, and reluctant admiration. He had spent years commanding authority, ensuring his subordinates obeyed without question. Now, the recruit he had humiliated, the one he had judged soft and inconsequential, outranked him in operational matters. Pride and ego warred with the undeniable truth. Evelyn Drake was not a recruit. She was a master strategist, a legendary covert operative, and she had walked into his base with a calm confidence that challenged everything he believed about leadership. The general's office phone buzzed, a summons from the intelligence officers waiting outside. Ava had requested a meeting in the war room, the secure hub where sensitive operations were planned and monitored. Halstead bristled, his mind flashing with objections, but he knew better than to refuse. As Halstead entered the war room, the hum of computers and low murmurs of intelligence staff filled the space. Screens displayed complex network activity, personnel files, and security logs. Ava stood at the center, calm and composed, her expression unreadable, her hair now tied back neatly. Yet even in restraint, she radiated authority. "General Halstead," she began without preamble, her voice calm but firm, "thank you for coming. We have work to do." Halstead swallowed, trying to maintain composure. "Work? Commander, I run this base. These investigations, this is under my authority. You may have clearance, but this is my command." Ava's gaze met his. She did not smile, she did not scold. She simply held his eyes, unwavering, her posture measured and unyielding. "With all due respect, sir, this investigation falls under my jurisdiction. My assignment is to identify and neutralize internal security breaches. Your cooperation is required to maintain the integrity of the base. Resistance is counterproductive." Halstead felt the tension coil in his chest. He had faced hostile adversaries, high-pressure negotiations, and even life-threatening crises in his career, yet nothing had prepared him for this moment. Standing in a room with a subordinate whose authority superseded his own, and whose competence he could not question. His instinct was to assert dominance, to reclaim control. Yet he recognized immediately that such an approach would be futile, even dangerous. Ava's calmness magnified the imbalance. She moved with purpose, pointing to digital displays, analyzing access logs, and cross-referencing personnel activity. Every step was deliberate, every instruction precise. Halstead watched, silently noting how effortlessly she navigated systems he barely understood. She was not just a soldier, she was a strategist, an orchestrator of operations that required a level of intelligence and foresight he had not anticipated. "I need full access to all personnel records, security logs, and encrypted communications," Ava continued, her tone authoritative but not harsh. "Any anomalies, regardless of rank, must be reported immediately. Halstead, I need your full cooperation." The general hesitated, pride clashing with pragmatism. Yet he saw the rationale behind her words. The base had already exhibited vulnerabilities, and further delay could compromise national security. Halstead exhaled, a reluctant acknowledgement of her authority. "Very well," he said, his voice tight. "You have access, but I expect updates and I expect protocols followed." Ava inclined her head slightly, a silent acknowledgement. "Agreed, protocols will be maintained. Operational security takes priority." The tension between them did not dissipate, however. It lingered in the air like a charged wire, a collision of pride and respect, ego and competence. Halstead had spent his life commanding obedience. Ava had spent hers commanding effectiveness, and in this room, effectiveness prevailed. Over the next several hours, Ava methodically reviewed personnel activity. She traced irregular communication patterns, identified gaps in access logs, and scrutinized the movements of key officers. Halstead observed, his eyes narrowing as he realized the depth of oversight she brought. What he had considered minor lapses were now revealed as deliberate patterns that could have been exploited by external actors. One officer, nervous under Ava's scrutiny, muttered an explanation for an unaccounted communication. Ava's response was calm but precise. Explain in detail. Documentation must match activity. If it does not, it must be investigated. Her tone was clinical, leaving no room for argument, yet not crossing into condescension. Halstead found himself listening intently, noting every step she took, every question she asked, every decision she made. For the first time, he felt the sting of humility. He had assumed control, he had assumed authority, he had assumed superiority. And yet here was someone who had walked in quietly, never demanding attention, and now held the room in complete command. As the day progressed, Ava identified several anomalies that pointed to a potential internal threat. Files had been accessed by individuals without proper authorization. Encrypted communications indicated information transfers that could compromise base operations, and patterns of behavior suggested someone within the command structure might be working against the base's interests. Halstead could not ignore the truth. He had underestimated the scope of vulnerability in his own command, and he could not ignore Ava's skill in exposing it. His pride wrestled with necessity as he accepted that she had become the central figure in this investigation. Ava paused at one terminal, scanning logs that revealed suspicious activity. "Sir," she said, addressing Halstead directly, "this individual may have been operating undetected for weeks. We need immediate action to contain the risk." Halstead nodded, swallowing his pride. "Agreed. Deploy teams and follow my orders, but work under your direction. I understand your expertise, Commander." Ava's gaze softened slightly, not in warmth but in acknowledgement. "Thank you, General. Coordination is essential for success. Mutual respect is non-negotiable in these circumstances." As operations began to move forward, Halstead felt a strange sense of disorientation. He had entered the war room confident in his authority, expecting to maintain control. Instead, he found himself observing a master strategist at work, a soldier whose competence dwarfed his assumptions, and whose calm authority rendered him secondary, yet not irrelevant. For the first time in decades, Halstead felt the tension between pride and pragmatism. He realized that leadership was not about domination, but about recognizing talent, leveraging skill, and understanding when to follow rather than command. Ava Evelyn Drake had taught him this lesson silently, without condescension, without humiliation, merely through her actions and composure. By evening, the first phase of investigation had revealed critical gaps. Intelligence teams moved under Ava's guidance, isolating suspicious activity and tracing its source. Halstead, now operating in a subordinate capacity for the first time, followed her lead, executing her directives with precision. He could not deny the results. She was methodical, effective, and unerring. When the war room finally emptied and the screens dimmed, Halstead remained behind, reflecting on the day. He had entered confident, prepared to assert authority. He had encountered calm defiance, brilliance, and skill beyond his expectations. And he had learned a lesson he would not forget. Underestimating someone based on appearances was a mistake, one that could have dire consequences. Ava left the war room quietly, her mission advancing, her presence commanding without effort. Halstead watched her leave, the weight of realization settling over him. She had not raised her voice. She had not demanded respect. And yet she had earned it fully, completely, undeniably. The base, once a place of routine, had transformed into a landscape of strategic maneuvering. And at its center stood Ava Mercer, Evelyn Drake, calm, precise, and unstoppable. General Halstead had been forced to witness it firsthand, and he knew with unshakable certainty that this was only the beginning. The war room had revealed the truth. Leadership was not about ego, pride, or seniority. Leadership was about effectiveness, skill, and vision. And Ava, the recruit he had mocked, the soldier he had underestimated, embodied it entirely. The base, usually a place of structured order and routine, had transformed overnight. Ava Mercer, or Commander Evelyn Drake, as her true identity now commanded, moved through the facility with a quiet authority that demanded attention without ostentation. Soldiers whispered in hushed tones as she passed, officers gave her space, and General Halstead followed at a measured distance, grappling with his own ego as he watched a woman he had once underestimated orchestrate operations with precision and confidence. Ava had begun reviewing every system, database, and network connection for signs of irregular activity. What had initially appeared as minor administrative anomalies now revealed patterns suggestive of a deliberate breach. File transfers occurred at odd hours, communications bypassed established security protocols, and certain personnel had accessed encrypted records far beyond their clearance. Each anomaly, when isolated, seemed trivial. But when analyzed together, they formed a mosaic of deliberate and coordinated internal compromise. "Sir," Ava said, addressing Halstead as she reviewed logs at a terminal, "the pattern indicates internal collusion. This is not an isolated incident. Someone within your command is siphoning sensitive data. If we do not contain it immediately, it could be exploited externally." Halstead felt a shiver run down his spine. Despite years of commanding his base and overseeing complex operations, he had not anticipated a breach of this magnitude occurring right under his nose. Pride and disbelief wrestled within him, but he knew Ava was correct. The general's decades of experience had prepared him for external threats, not the insidious, invisible danger that had been quietly infiltrating his ranks. Ava continued, her voice steady and deliberate. "I need full cooperation from all departments. Communications must be monitored, access logs traced, and personnel cross-referenced with all recorded movements. Time is critical. Every hour that passes allows the breach to continue." The intelligence officers moved efficiently under her direction, implementing protocols with precision. Halstead observed as she directed the movement of surveillance teams, monitored communications in real time, and cross-checked personnel access. Each decision was deliberate, yet executed with remarkable speed. Ava was not merely responding to the breach, she was anticipating it. As evening approached, the first tangible evidence emerged. Patterns of unauthorized access linked to a small subset of personnel who had previously passed inspections without issue. Even experienced officers were surprised, Halstead included. It became clear that the breach was not just a simple oversight or procedural lapse. It was a deliberate act, potentially orchestrated by someone familiar with the inner workings of the base. Halstead, standing behind Ava, found himself silently admiring her methodical approach. He had once considered her fragile, compliant, and inconsequential. Now he watched as she navigated a complex web of data and personnel dynamics, uncovering threads of deception that he, with all his experience, had overlooked. "General," Ava said, pausing briefly to look at him, "your cooperation is essential. I need you to follow my directives to the letter. Any deviation could compromise the investigation." Halstead exhaled, swallowing his pride. He had long been the authority in this base, yet he recognized that resisting Ava's guidance would be catastrophic. "Understood," he said. "We proceed as you direct." For the next several hours, Ava oversaw a meticulous sweep of the base. Communications were monitored for irregular transmissions. Personnel movements were logged and compared to schedules. Encrypted files were traced, revealing unusual patterns of access and deletion. Every lead Ava pursued brought her closer to the source of the breach. As midnight approached, Ava traced a particularly troubling communication, an encrypted data packet being transmitted from an officer's terminal to an external location. Halstead leaned over her shoulder, tension coiling in his chest. That's impossible," he muttered. "I would have never suspected this officer." Ava's eyes remained calm, unwavering. "Appearances are misleading, General. Competence in one area does not guarantee loyalty or discretion. This officer has been exploiting trust and familiarity to mask illicit activity. We must act quickly." Halstead felt a pang of guilt. He had prided himself on knowing his officers, on maintaining order and discipline. Yet here was evidence that someone he trusted had betrayed not only him, but the integrity of the base itself. Ava, however, moved past sentimentality, focusing solely on the facts. She began coordinating a discreet operation to apprehend the suspect without alerting others, ensuring the breach could be contained before it escalated. The operation was delicate. Ava directed surveillance teams to observe the officer, tracing movements and monitoring communications. Halstead, operating under her guidance, realized that this was unlike any operation he had conducted. There were no blaring alarms, no obvious maneuvers, only precise, calculated actions designed to catch the perpetrator off guard while protecting sensitive information. As the investigation progressed, Ava discovered that the breach was more extensive than initially anticipated. The compromised officer was part of a small network, each member exploiting vulnerabilities within the base. Access to encrypted training simulations, operational manuals, and security protocols had been systematically siphoned. The potential consequences were severe, but Ava remained unflinching. "Sir," she said, addressing Halstead once more, "the extent of the breach requires immediate containment. We cannot allow this to continue beyond tonight. I need all teams coordinated, every access point monitored, and every movement traced. Lives and national security are at stake." Halstead nodded, fully aware of the gravity of the situation. He had spent years training soldiers, overseeing operations, and commanding authority, yet he now recognized that he had never faced a challenge of this complexity. Ava's calm decisiveness, her ability to process vast amounts of information and anticipate moves, left him both awed and humbled. Hours passed as the teams executed Ava's plan. Security checkpoints were reinforced, suspicious communications intercepted, and personnel cross-referenced against access logs. Halstead followed her lead, coordinating units as directed. By the early hours of the morning, the first tangible result emerged. The primary suspect had been identified, his activities traced, and evidence collected. Ava paused to review the findings. "The breach has been contained for now," she said, her voice calm but resolute. "The responsible party has been identified. Next, we will proceed with apprehension and interrogation. We cannot afford error." Halstead leaned back, exhaustion weighing on him, but a sense of admiration for Ava now dominated his thoughts. He had underestimated her entirely. The recruit he had mocked, the woman he had cut the hair of in front of the entire company, had not only uncovered the breach but orchestrated a strategy to contain it with precision, authority, and unwavering calm. As dawn approached, Ava reviewed the operation's results. Evidence was documented, surveillance footage collected, and preliminary conclusions drawn. Halstead, watching from the sidelines, realized that he had been witness to a masterclass in strategy and leadership. He had spent years enforcing discipline, but Ava had shown him that true authority came from competence, intelligence, and decisive action, not ego or rank alone. The breach, now traced to its source, set the stage for the next phase, apprehending the responsible officer and uncovering the full network of conspirators. Halstead knew the coming hours would test every skill he possessed. Yet he also knew something else. Ava Mercer, Evelyn Drake, had turned the base on its head, and her leadership would guide them through the danger ahead. By the time the first rays of sunlight lit the parade ground, the base was in a state of controlled alert. Operations were ongoing, but under Ava's guidance, Every action was precise and purposeful. Halstead, reflecting on the night's events, finally allowed himself a rare admission. He had misjudged her completely. The woman he had once considered soft, fragile, or ordinary had revealed herself to be a strategist, a leader, and a force capable of reshaping not only the base's security, but his understanding of leadership itself. Ava, as ever, remained composed. Her mission continued, her focus unwavering. The breach was contained, but the investigation was far from over. And as Halstead watched her move through the command center with quiet authority, he knew the full measure of her capabilities had yet to be revealed. By the following morning, the base was tense with anticipation. Every soldier, officer, and trainee moved with heightened awareness, the events of the previous night leaving no room for complacency. Ava Mercer, Evelyn Drake, was already at work, reviewing the compiled data from the breach, identifying the weak points that had allowed the internal leak to persist. Her mind moved faster than the most advanced systems on the base, weaving patterns, predicting moves, and narrowing down potential suspects. The evidence pointed to one individual, a decorated sergeant named Marcus Kane, a man widely respected among his peers, whose service record had appeared impeccable until now. Logs revealed clandestine transmissions to an encrypted external network, unusual patterns of access, and deliberate tampering with surveillance protocols. Every move Kane had made had been carefully calculated to evade detection, but Ava's meticulous methods had uncovered the truth. Halstead, observing from behind her, felt a wave of disbelief. "Kane, that's impossible. He's one of my most trusted officers. I've relied on him for years." Ava's gaze did not waver. "Appearances are deceiving, General. Trust without verification is a vulnerability. Kane has exploited the confidence you placed in him to conceal his actions. We must act immediately to prevent further compromise." The room fell silent as Ava outlined the plan. The goal was simple but fraught with risk: apprehend Kane before he could escape, secure any evidence, and prevent the network from sending sensitive information to external actors. Yet execution required precision, timing, and coordination, and Ava commanded it all with quiet authority. "Teams Alpha and Bravo will coordinate to seal off all exits," she instructed. "Team Charlie will monitor communications for any attempts to transmit data. Sergeant Kane is likely aware of surveillance measures. Approach with caution. We cannot underestimate his resourcefulness." Halstead, now fully in a supporting role, followed her instructions, directing units while maintaining strict compliance with her plan. He felt a strange mix of frustration and admiration. Frustration for having been outmaneuvered by someone he had underestimated, and admiration for her unparalleled efficiency and clarity. Hours passed as teams moved into position. Surveillance cameras captured Kane attempting to access terminals, his movements cautious, deliberate. Ava's eyes scanned multiple screens simultaneously, noting every detail: timing of his footsteps, angles of camera coverage, and potential escape routes. Every prediction she made was accurate, every instruction precise. Finally, Kane made a critical mistake. Attempting to access an off-limits terminal, he triggered a silent alert that Ava had intentionally left unmarked. Within moments, teams surrounded him, cutting off escape routes and forcing him into a controlled area. Kane, realizing he had been cornered, attempted to bluff, confident that his reputation and experience could buy him time. Ava stepped forward, calm and commanding. "Sergeant Kane," she said evenly, "you are under arrest for unauthorized data transfers and breaches of national security. Resistance is unnecessary. You have been outmaneuvered." Kane's eyes flickered with surprise, then hardened with defiance. "Outmaneuvered? By a recruit?" he sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. "You don't even know the full extent of what I've done." Halstead felt a surge of anger, wanting to intervene to assert control, but Ava's hand on his arm stopped him. "Observe, General. Let me handle this," she said softly but firmly. Halstead reluctantly stepped back, watching as she took command of the situation. With the precision of a seasoned operative, Ava disarmed Kane, using leverage and positioning that left him incapacitated within moments. No shouting, no unnecessary force, just exact, calculated action. Halstead watched, his pride bruised, as the man he had trusted was subdued by the woman he had underestimated. "Search him," Ava commanded. Teams moved in quickly, uncovering encrypted drives, unauthorized communications devices, and evidence of coordinated data transfers. Every item confirmed the extent of the betrayal. Kane's network, though sophisticated, had been compromised by her foresight. Kane, now restrained, glared at Ava with a mixture of fear and defiance. "You think this ends here?" he spat. "There are others, you'll never find them all." Ava's response was calm, unyielding. "Then we will continue until we do. You underestimated the system and me. That mistake ends tonight." Halstead, witnessing the entire operation, felt a profound shift. The recruit he had mocked, humiliated, and underestimated had not only identified a highly skilled traitor, but had orchestrated his capture with flawless precision. Her calm, calculated actions had prevented a potentially catastrophic breach of national security. After Kane was secured, Ava reviewed the evidence, cross-referencing communications and network activity. Patterns emerged, suggesting the possibility of additional collaborators within the base. Every lead she pursued revealed the depth of the deception, yet her composure never faltered. Halstead, following her guidance, realized that her approach was methodical, strategic, and ultimately unassailable. The base now operated under a heightened state of alert. Soldiers and officers moved efficiently, aware that the internal threat had been neutralized but that further vigilance was essential. Ava directed operations with quiet authority, issuing instructions that were executed flawlessly. Halstead, though still reeling from the revelation of Kane's betrayal, could not help but respect her unmatched competence. By nightfall, Kane had been interrogated, and critical information about his collaborators and methods had been uncovered. Ava coordinated with intelligence officers to secure evidence, trace remaining network vulnerabilities, and implement new protocols to prevent further breaches. Every step was deliberate, every decision informed by experience and foresight. Halstead finally allowed himself a moment of reflection. He had entered this mission confident in his authority, ready to enforce discipline and maintain control. Instead, he had been forced to acknowledge a harsh truth. Leadership was not about ego, rank, or appearances. It was about skill, strategy, and execution, qualities Ava possessed in abundance. As Ava returned to her quarters to review the day's findings, Halstead remained in the command center, contemplating the events that had unfolded. Kane had been apprehended, the breach contained, and the base stabilized. Yet the lesson lingered. Underestimating someone based on appearance or rank could have devastating consequences. Ava Mercer, Evelyn Drake, had demonstrated that competence, calm, and authority often exist behind quiet eyes and understated demeanor. The base, once orderly and predictable, had been transformed. A single woman, underestimated and mocked, had identified a traitor, orchestrated his capture, and restored security with precision and calm. Halstead, though reluctant to admit it aloud, had learned the full extent of her capabilities. Ava, as always, remained composed, methodical, and focused. The operation had succeeded, but the mission continued. The network of conspirators, though partially exposed, still posed questions, and her investigation was far from over. Halstead, now fully aware of her unparalleled skill, understood that the coming hours would test the base, the officers, and even himself in ways he had never anticipated. The night settled over the base, quiet but vigilant. Ava Mercer, Evelyn Drake, had acted with precision, decisiveness, and calm authority. And General Halstead, once confident in his control, had witnessed firsthand the power of competence over assumption, skill over pride, and calm over chaos. The breach had been contained, the traitor apprehended, but the story was far from over. Ava's mission continued, her presence a constant reminder that appearances could deceive, and underestimating her would be a mistake no one on the base would ever repeat. The morning sun broke over the base, casting long shadows across the parade ground. The air was crisp, but the tension from the previous night lingered, heavy and palpable. Soldiers moved with quiet urgency, officers whispered behind closed doors, and the memory of the internal breach hung over the base like a warning. The apprehension of Marcus Kane had been swift and precise, but the aftershocks of betrayal and revelation were far from contained. General Halstead sat in his office, staring at the blank wall before him. The events of the past week replayed endlessly in his mind. The hair incident, Ava Mercer's calm defiance, the discovery of her true identity as Commander Evelyn Drake, and the meticulous capture of Kane. Each moment chipped away at his pride, forcing him to confront a reality he had spent decades avoiding. He had misjudged her completely. For years, Halstead had believed that authority came from rank, experience, and control. He had drilled obedience into his soldiers, maintained discipline with iron rules, and assumed that competence was evident in outward behavior. Ava had shattered every assumption he held. She had walked into his base quietly, understated, and had revealed herself to be a master strategist, a calm and relentless force capable of seeing patterns and solutions he had overlooked. The door to his office opened quietly. Lieutenant Daniels stepped in, a hesitant expression on his face. "Sir, Commander Drake requested a brief discussion before the next operation phase," he said carefully. Halstead nodded, running a hand through his thinning hair. "Send her in," he said, his voice measured but tinged with residual tension. Ava entered the office, calm and composed. Her uniform was precise, her posture perfect, and her expression unreadable. She did not smile, nor did she apologize for the tension her presence inevitably caused. She simply approached, placing a file on Halstead's desk. "Sir," she began, her voice steady, "we have secured Marcus Kane and collected preliminary evidence regarding the internal network. However, this is only part of the operation. There may be additional collaborators or external influences we have yet to identify." Halstead leaned back in his chair, studying her. The pride that had once blinded him to her abilities had faded, replaced by respect, reluctant, yes, but undeniable. "You handled Kane," he said slowly. "Efficiently. I underestimated you." Ava's gaze met his, unwavering. "Underestimation is common when appearances do not match capability, General. I am not here to challenge your authority unnecessarily, but to ensure the integrity of this base and the mission at hand." Halstead exhaled, the weight of humility settling over him. For the first time, he admitted to himself that true leadership was not about ego or rank. It was about competence, clarity, and execution. Ava had demonstrated all of these in abundance. The discussion shifted to operational strategy. Ava outlined the next steps, securing remaining network vulnerabilities, identifying potential collaborators, and implementing stricter protocols to prevent future breaches. Each point was meticulously detailed, with contingencies for every possible scenario. Halstead listened, following her lead, nodding the precision and foresight in every recommendation. As the morning progressed, Ava moved through the base, observing personnel, issuing directives, and coordinating teams. Halstead followed closely, now operating in a supporting role, executing her instructions and ensuring smooth compliance. He could no longer view her as a subordinate. She had become the central authority in matters of security and strategy. Soldiers whispered as they observed the dynamic. Some expressed disbelief that a single recruit had outmaneuvered the general, apprehended a traitor, and restored order with such precision. Others murmured admiration for her calm and unwavering presence. Halstead, aware of their observations, did not speak. He simply followed, silently acknowledging the shift in command and perspective. By afternoon, Ava had identified additional irregularities. minor manipulations in access logs, attempts to bypass surveillance, and subtle discrepancies in training data. While none were immediately critical, they indicated a pattern of behavior that required monitoring. Halstead noted each observation, silently impressed by her ability to detect what others might overlook. "General," Ava said, pausing to look at him, "it is essential that we maintain vigilance. Trust is necessary, but verification is paramount. The breach has been contained, but the threat may not be entirely neutralized. We must anticipate, not react." Halstead nodded, fully aware of the wisdom in her words. He had spent decades reacting to threats with rigid protocols, yet Ava's approach was proactive, analytical, and precise. He realized that in order to lead effectively, he needed to learn from her methods to adopt her calm, calculated approach to problem solving. That evening, Halstead called a meeting with senior officers. The agenda was clear: acknowledge the breach, outline corrective measures, and ensure that every member of the base understood the gravity of the situation. Ava led the briefing, her voice calm but commanding. She presented evidence, identified vulnerabilities, and explained the procedures to prevent future incidents. Every officer in the room listened intently, aware that her competence was unmatched. Halstead watched from the sidelines, silently reflecting. He had entered the room expecting to assert authority, to maintain his role as the primary leader. Instead, he witnessed someone operating with unparalleled skill, earning respect through action rather than title. He realized that true leadership was not about dominance, but about effectiveness and clarity. After the briefing, Ava approached Halstead privately. "Sir," she said quietly, "I understand this has been a challenging week. Your experience is invaluable, but I require your full cooperation to ensure the operation's success. Our goal is the same: the security and integrity of this base." Halstead met her gaze, his expression softened. "Commander, I admit I was wrong. I misjudged you, and I misjudged the situation. Your skill, calmness, and foresight have prevented what could have been a catastrophic breach. I will follow your lead from here on out." Ava nodded, accepting his acknowledgement without pride or condescension. "Thank you, General. Cooperation ensures success. Together, we can address the remaining threats efficiently." As night fell, Halstead walked alone across the parade ground, reflecting on the lessons he had learned. He had faced external threats, crises, and betrayal, yet the most profound challenge had come from within, from a recruit he had underestimated. Ava Mercer had demonstrated that true authority is earned through competence, precision, and calm, and that underestimating someone based on appearances can have dire consequences. The base, now stabilized and vigilant, had transformed under her guidance. Soldiers operated with renewed purpose, officers executed directives with precision, and Halstead himself had shifted from authority figure to collaborator, recognizing that leadership is multifaceted and that humility is a strength, not a weakness. Ava, reviewing reports late into the night, remained focused and composed. Her mission was far from over, yet she moved with the calm certainty of someone who had prepared for every contingency. Halstead, observing from a distance, understood that her presence had reshaped the base, and his understanding of leadership forever. In the quiet of the night, with the base secure but alert, Halstead allowed himself a rare thought. He had learned more from Ava in a single week than he had in decades of command, and he knew, with absolute certainty, that underestimating her again would be impossible and unwise. The reckoning had been more than just the apprehension of a traitor. It had been a confrontation with pride, ego, and assumptions. Ava Mercer, Evelyn Drake, had not only restored security but had reshaped the very understanding of authority within the base. And General Halstead, humbled and enlightened, recognized that the true measure of leadership was not in rank or title, but in competence, foresight, and the ability to act decisively under pressure. The base had transformed. Once a place of routine drills and predictable discipline, it now pulsed with tension and vigilance. The aftermath of the internal breach had left its mark. Soldiers and officers alike were wary, more observant, and acutely aware that even the most trusted personnel could be a potential threat. Yet there was also a newfound respect for one individual, Ava Mercer, known officially as Commander Evelyn Drake. Ava moved through the command center with quiet authority, reviewing final reports, coordinating follow-up investigations, and ensuring that the lessons learned from the breach were implemented. Every action she took was deliberate, efficient, and precise. The apprehension of Marcus Kane had been only the first step. While the immediate threat was neutralized, her mission demanded that she ensure the base's long-term security. Halstead, now fully reconciled with the shift in leadership, followed her lead. Pride and ego no longer dictated his actions. Experience and judgment now guided his support of her decisions. He recognized that Ava's competence and foresight were unmatched, and that in matters of national security, the measure of a leader was not ego but effectiveness. In a private briefing, Ava laid out the final steps of her operation. "Sir," she said, her voice calm but resolute, "we have identified all immediate vulnerabilities. Kane's network has been neutralized, and preliminary investigations indicate no further internal collaborators at this time. However, ongoing surveillance and strict adherence to protocol are essential to prevent future breaches. I recommend permanent adjustments to our security systems and personnel oversight." Halstead nodded. "Your assessment is sound, Commander. I admit I have never witnessed this level of precision or control. You have transformed this base, and you have done so without unnecessary force or chaos. Your methods are exemplary." Ava inclined her head slightly, acknowledging the compliment without vanity. "Effectiveness is the priority, General. Reputation and ego are secondary. I have been assigned this mission to ensure security, nothing more. The results speak for themselves." As the day progressed, Ava oversaw the implementation of her recommendations. Security protocols were tightened, surveillance systems upgraded, and personnel underwent retraining to prevent future lapses. Every officer and soldier moved with purpose, aware that the quiet, precise woman they had once underestimated was now the driving force behind the base's operational security. Word of Ava's accomplishments spread beyond the base. Intelligence, command, and higher authorities recognized the significance of her actions. The containment of a high-level internal breach, the apprehension of a traitor, and the restoration of the base's integrity without public scandal or chaos. Messages of commendation arrived, discreet but unmistakable in their praise. Halstead, standing at the edge of the command center, observed her. The general had come to terms with his own misjudgments, humbled by her ability to act decisively where he had hesitated, to see patterns where he had overlooked them, and to lead without relying on authority alone. He had learned a lesson in humility, respect, and the true meaning of competence. The final step in Ava's mission came when Kane's interrogation revealed that he had acted alone. The network he had established was isolated, and no further internal threats were identified. This confirmation allowed Ava to scale back immediate operations while maintaining vigilance. Halstead acknowledged the conclusion of the crisis, but he remained acutely aware that the lessons of the breach would echo for years. In a formal assembly, Ava addressed the assembled officers and soldiers. Her voice was calm, authoritative, and unwavering. "The breach has been contained. The individual responsible has been apprehended and all vulnerabilities have been addressed. This base is now secure. However, the events of the past week serve as a reminder. Vigilance is essential and assumptions can be dangerous. Trust must be balanced with verification. Competence must always be recognized, regardless of appearances." The room erupted in subdued applause. Soldiers and officers alike recognized the weight of her words and the precision of her actions. Ava's presence commanded respect not through rank alone, but through demonstrated skill, strategic brilliance, and unwavering calm. Halstead, standing in the front row, felt a profound shift within himself. He approached her after the assembly. "Commander Drake," he said, his voice steady, "I owe you an apology and acknowledgement. I misjudged you completely. I underestimated your abilities, your judgment, and your authority. You have not only contained a breach that could have been catastrophic but have redefined leadership for all of us. I am grateful and humbled." Ava looked at him, her gaze steady. "Thank you, General. Your cooperation was essential to the mission's success. Leadership is not about ego or hierarchy, it is about results. Together, we ensured the integrity of this base." In that moment, a quiet respect settled between them. Halstead, once the unquestioned authority, had come to understand that competence, calm, and decisiveness could supersede rank and tradition. Ava, once a recruit underestimated and mocked, had demonstrated brilliance under pressure, achieving what few could accomplish and earning recognition not through force or assertion, but through precision, foresight, and unwavering professionalism. Later, in a private debrief, Ava reviewed the final logs of the operation. She noted the patterns, closed remaining gaps, and drafted recommendations for future security measures. Every action was deliberate, yet her demeanor remained calm and composed. Halstead, observing her efficiency, realized that her presence had reshaped the culture of the base. Competence and foresight were now recognized. Respect was earned through skill, and assumptions were no longer tolerated. The day ended with a quiet ceremony. Marcus Kane was formally removed from duty, his record sealed, and the threat he posed fully neutralized. The base returned to routine, but the events of the past week had permanently altered its hierarchy of respect and authority. Ava Mercer, Evelyn Drake, had emerged as an unassailable figure of competence, her reputation cemented not by titles or appearances but by actions and results. Halstead walked across the parade ground as the sun set, reflecting on the lessons learned. Pride, ego, and assumption had almost led to disaster. Humility, observation, and recognition of true skill had averted it. And Ava, the recruit he had once dismissed, had proven herself indispensable, reshaping not only the security of the base but the understanding of leadership itself. In the end, the story was not only about a breach averted or a traitor apprehended. It was about recognition, humility, and the triumph of competence over assumption. Ava Mercer, known to the world as Commander Evelyn Drake, had walked quietly into the base, appeared ordinary, and revealed herself to be extraordinary. She had commanded respect not through fear or intimidation but through skill, calm, and decisive action, a testament to the power of true capability. As night fully settled over the base, Halstead looked toward the command center, the lights illuminating Ava as she reviewed final protocols. He knew, without doubt, that her legacy would endure, and that the lessons she had imparted to him, to the officers, and to the entire base would shape their approach to leadership, security, and vigilance for years to come. The base was secure, the traitor neutralized, and Ava Mercer, Evelyn Drake, stood at the center of it all, calm, precise, unstoppable, and finally recognized for the brilliance that had always been her true identity. The mission was complete, but the legend of her competence and courage would echo far beyond the walls of the base, a reminder that appearances can deceive, and that the quietest figures often carry the greatest power.